They laughed when he said he'd be rich. Today, they stand before his mansion in stunned silence. That line isn't hyperbole. It's the moment we meet our hero, a boy with no safety net called Amadou, who at 12 made a vow that sounded ridiculous to everyone around him. Yet here's the promise we'll keep. By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how he turned mockery into respect, and how a single suitcase and a single scholarship slot became the foundation of his family's future. Amadou's journey began in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a dusty street market. His father logged endless hours at the embassy, wrestling with paperwork long into the night. His mother cleaned floors at the regional hospital before sunrise. Money was never abundant. Hope barely trickled in. When Amadou announced his plan, classmates snickered. Neighbors shook their heads. Even his own older brother joked, "You'll be back in 6 months," begging for a bus fare. But Amadou didn't shrink. He leaned into every challenge, because he knew that real growth happens outside comfort. Picture this: a 12-year-old sharing a single bowl of rice with his sisters, then poring over English flashcards by candlelight. He studied while the city slept. He listened to the roar of departing flights overhead and imagined the day he'd be on one of those planes, heading to America, not as a tourist, but as a student with a mission. Fast forward to that first morning in New York. The chill in the air was nothing like home. The sidewalks were crowded. The voices around him rushed past, faster than he could parse. But instead of stepping back, Amadou stepped forward, each hesitant footfall marking the start of a relentless climb. In this video, you'll hear how every setback, missed buses, odd jobs, failed ventures, was actually a step towards something greater. You'll learn why he refused shortcuts, even when they dangled in front of him like glittering traps. And you'll witness the scene that changed everything. The day Amadou invited his family to the grand unveiling of more than a house, a monument to resilience, grit, and a promise that refused to break. Stick around, because in just a moment we'll dive into the humble beginnings of this remarkable journey. You'll feel the weight of that first vow, and you'll understand why those who once laughed couldn't help but tremble when they finally saw what he built. If you believe a single promise can change a life, tap that like button now. We've all faced out. Tell me in the comments a time someone told you you'll never make it. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the turning point. Ready to see how a boy with nothing became a man with everything? Let's begin. Long before the gleaming skyline of New York, Amadou's world was a modest apartment perched above a bustling market. On any given morning, he'd slip past his father's uniform back, wrinkled from long nights at the embassy, and tiptoe around his mother's mopping bucket before she crouched beside a hospital hallway, disinfecting floors. Money was scarce. His family's pride was everything. At school, Amadou was quick to learn but painfully aware of his differences. His uniforms were hand-me-downs, his books scribbled with translations in the margins. Yet with every correction from his older sisters, he grew sure of one thing. Mastery of English could be his ticket out. That certainty ignited the night he stood beneath the single, bare bulb in their kitchen and spoke up. His parents exchanged weary glances as he said, "I'm going to America. I'll study, I'll work. I'll build enough to lift all of us." His voice was steady, but Amadou's heart thundered. His father removed his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose. "You're our third," he finally said. "The middle. It's always the middle child who changes a family's path." His mother reached over, patted his hand, and squeezed. No grand celebration followed, just a muted nod. In that silence, the promise settled like a seed ready to grow. Over the next year, every morning began before dawn. While neighbors slept, Amadou pored over embassy paperwork, hand-delivering forms to his father's office to ensure no detail was missed. At school, he joined every English club and tutoring session he could find. When classmates played soccer, he stayed behind, reciting vocabulary until his tongue stumbled no more. At home, he turned chores into study time. He timed his mother's cleaning shifts and practiced phrases into the echoing hallways. By candlelight, he read American history aloud, imagining the founding fathers' voices as if they spoke directly to him. Each word learned was a brick laid in the foundation of a dream. By the time his acceptance letter arrived, Amadou's world felt different. His shoulders carried a new weight. equal parts excitement and responsibility. He packed a single suitcase, 2 years' worth of clothes, family photographs tucked into a worn notebook, and a stack of flashcards. The night before his departure, neighbors gathered to bid him farewell. Some gave prayers, others offered small gifts. His mother couldn't sleep. She hovered in the dim hallway until he slipped down the stairs. As he reached the bottom step, she bent to whisper, "Remember who you carry with you." He nodded, clutching her words as tightly as his suitcase handle. The next morning when he stepped onto the plane, that promise wasn't just a memory. It was his compass. The moment Amadou stepped off the plane, he felt like the world had shifted beneath his feet. The air was sharp, the wind unfamiliar, and the noise constant. Announcements echoed from the airport ceiling in words too quick to grasp. Travelers passing by, moving with purpose, while he stood motionless, just a boy with one suitcase and a dream too big to name aloud. A kind airport volunteer pointed him toward the student shuttle. He thanked her 3 times, once in English, twice in a language he'd left behind. The ride into Queens was quiet. From the back seat of the shuttle, Amadou watched America unfold like a movie. Fast cars, blinking signs, people rushing through intersections without looking up. Every block felt like a new chapter he didn't know how to read. His new home was a small basement room in a host family's house. The mattress creaked with every movement. The heater rattled in its sleep. But it was his. That night, Amadou couldn't sleep. He opened his notebook and whispered every English word he'd memorized, one more time, for safety. His first school morning was harder than expected. He wore an oversized sweater his sister had sewn from hand-me-downs. At the front office, he handed over his papers with nervous hands. A student volunteer led him to homeroom, speaking quickly, too quickly. Amadou nodded anyway. The halls were loud, the students louder. In his home country, voices were lowered in classrooms. Here, they bounced off lockers, sharp and fast. He sat in the back row and focused on the teacher's lips, catching one word out of every 3. He wrote what he heard, not always knowing what it meant. Lunchtime was the loneliest hour. He stood in line, uncertain what to pick. The food was strange, the smells unfamiliar. He chose bread and fruit. Looking around, every table was full of friendships. So he sat near a vending machine, biting slowly. He kept his head down, but he listened, he watched, he learned. Outside of school, challenges piled on. The subway was a labyrinth. Once, he missed a stop and spent an hour getting back. His budget allowed for 1 ride a day, no mistakes. He skipped hot meals to afford flashcards, hoarded pencils like treasure, and reused notebooks until the pages blurred. One Saturday, he knocked on a neighbor's door with a letter he didn't understand. That neighbor, a retired librarian named Mrs. Green, read it aloud slowly, then invited him inside. Every weekend after that, she gave him cookies and conversation. With her, he learned how to slow English down until it fit his tongue. By winter, he understood morning announcements. By spring, he spoke up in class. And one afternoon, when a classmate asked him where he was from, he answered with pride and clarity. That night, for the first time, he called home and said, "It's getting easier." Culture shock didn't defeat him. It trained him. Every lonely meal, mistrained, and awkward hello taught him to adapt without erasing himself. America wasn't built for boys like Amadou to belong easily, but he wasn't here for ease. He was here to keep a promise. By the time Amadou reached his sophomore year, he'd grown accustomed to the rhythms of American life. But new challenges lurked beneath the surface. One afternoon after classes, he found himself walking home beside a small group of upperclassmen, Marcus, Deshawn, and Luis. They moved with easy confidence, laughter echoing off brick walls. Amadou admired their swagger. They seemed to own every corner of the street. "Yo, Amadou," Marcus called, tossing him a grin. "We're making some quick cash this weekend. You in?" Amadou hesitated. He'd heard whispers, late-night deals and fast flips that promised 3 times what he earned in a week of bagging groceries. His eyes flicked to the cracked pavement, then back to Marcus's expectant face. A knot tightened in his chest. Part of him craved the freedom that money would bring. New textbooks, warmer clothes, the chance to send more home. But another part remembered the late nights studying under a single bulb, the way his mother flinched when rent rattled down their hallway. Those memories weren't just background noise. They were the reason he came here in the first place. Deshaun leaned in. Look, man, you're smart. You don't need to be stuck doing low-wage shifts forever. Louis smirked. We've got a guy who'll front the inventory. You help distribute, and we split the profit. Easy. Amadou felt sweat prickling his forehead. He thought of the scholarship slot his father secured and the pride that had shone in his mother's eyes. He recalled the promise he'd whispered on that flight. I'll build enough to lift us all. He looked each of them in the eye. I'm sorry, he said softly. They paused. Marcus's grin faltered. You're backing out? Amadou nodded. I have to keep my promise, not just to get rich, but to do it right. A cold silence fell. Marcus shrugged and stepped away. Suit yourself. Deshaun and Louis exchanged glances, then followed. The street felt suddenly empty. No laughter, no easy companionship. That night, Amadou tossed and turned in his creaky bed. He wondered if he'd made a mistake. The thrill of quick cash still tugged at him, but as he lay awake, he replayed his mother's words. Remember who you carry with you. He realized that accepting a shortcut would carry consequences far heavier than any tuition bill. The next morning, Amadou walked into class with a new resolve. When the teacher announced a citywide entrepreneurship challenge, cash prize included, he felt a spark. This was his arena, legitimate risk, public competition, honest rewards. He stayed after school to sign up, blinking in the late sunlight as he filled out forms. That decision marked the true turning point. Rather than trading integrity for speed, Amadou would test his skills on a level field. He prepared nights after dinner, drafting business plans between vocabulary drills. His friends saw him buried in notes and laughed behind his back, but he didn't mind. Their doubts fueled his focus. In the weeks that followed, he pitched an idea to connect international students with local tutors, born from his own need for language help. Judges praised his clarity and passion. When they announced his name as the winner, something inside him shifted. Temptation had been met and turned into opportunity. From that moment on, shortcuts lost their appeal. Amadou understood that true progress comes from earning every step, and that every refusal to the easy path made his promise stronger. While other students celebrated weekends and school breaks, Amadou treated time like currency, too valuable to waste. With no family nearby, no fallback plan, and barely enough to cover his essentials, he used every spare hour to build momentum, dollar by dollar. His first job was sweeping hair from a salon floor in the early mornings before class. The owner, Ms. Lila, barely spoke to him at first, but she noticed how he showed up 10 minutes early every shift and never touched his phone while working. One day, after he'd stayed late to help restock, she gave him a bonus, $5 extra in cash. He tucked it into his notebook and wrote on the page beside it, "Earned, not luck." After school, he bagged groceries at a corner store. The hours were long, and the customers weren't always kind, but Amadou watched everything. The way the manager handled the register, how prices were calculated, how inventory was managed. He wasn't just earning tips. He was studying systems. On Sundays, he helped restock shelves at a small family-run supply shop. He sorted cans, hauled boxes, and learned the value of silence. While his classmates posted selfies and played video games, Amadou was learning how business worked from the inside out. No certificate, no applause, just quiet observation and steady growth. He also sought out contests, any challenge that could reward effort with cash or recognition. His school hosted a citywide essay competition on innovation. The prompt was broad, but Amadou wrote about what he knew best: the value of structure when you have no safety net. He framed his childhood routines, his job schedules, and even his grocery store price tracking into a kind of survival system. His essay didn't win first place, but it won second. That prize money didn't go towards shoes or entertainment. He bought a second-hand laptop and a stack of used business books. Each book held someone else's story of risk and reward, and Amadou devoured them like instructions to a puzzle he was slowly solving. His friends at school began to notice. "Why are you always working?" they'd ask. He never answered with more than a shrug. He didn't need to explain. His reason wasn't for show. The most valuable lessons didn't come from textbooks. They came from exhaustion, from long shifts followed by longer nights of study. He was tired, often to the point of headaches, but never discouraged. He learned how to cook cheap meals in bulk. He learned to stretch every dollar without sacrificing his goals. He learned discipline not because it was taught, but because it was necessary. At 17, while others applied to summer camps or beach jobs, Amadou registered for a small business development program at the local community center. It was unpaid, but it came with mentorship. There, he met a volunteer who had once run a logistics company and who saw something in Amadou: focus, hunger, humility. That summer changed him. He stopped just working jobs and started collecting skills. Each opportunity, no matter how small, became another brick. He kept a list in his notebook titled Things I Know Now. It included everything from how to calculate markup to never spend before saving. He didn't talk much about what he was building. He didn't need to. The silence wasn't secrecy, it was preparation. And while no one could yet see the mansion that lived in his mind, Amadou knew that every box lifted, every aisle cleaned, every dollar earned. It was all laying the foundation. Amadou's hunger for progress led him from wage work to his first true venture at 17, buying broken electronics, fixing them, and reselling at a markup. He scoured online forums late into the night, teaching himself circuit diagrams and soldering techniques. The tiny glow of his soldering iron became a beacon in the dark, promising transformation. He scraped together a few $100s by saving every side gig dollar he could. That capital went toward a batch of used phones and tablets that needed repair. With a borrowed toolkit and online tutorials as his guide, he spent evenings taking devices apart and carefully replacing screens and batteries. The tactile rhythm of tiny screws turning, the faint scent of melting plastic. Each repair was a test of patience. When he listed his first items, Amadou felt a rush. Notifications pinged as his listings went live. Then silence. Days passed with no inquiries. When someone finally bought a broken tablet, they returned it, citing unseen damage. The refund hit his account like a splash of cold water. His profit vanished, replaced by shipping costs and crushed hopes. He could have quit, but Amadou cataloged every misstep. The party order that didn't fit, the soldering joint that failed, the description that misled buyers. He adjusted. He tried again. A few modest sales trickled in, but they barely covered expenses. After 3 months, he totaled his earnings, a $20 profit on an initial investment of $200. The return was miserable, but the lessons were priceless. Undeterred, he shifted to dropshipping at 18. He researched trending products, scrolled through supplier websites, and designed basic ads on his laptop. He launched with high expectations, picturing packages bound for customers across the country. His heart raced as he clicked publish. The first orders came quickly, each one a validation. But then came complaints. Delayed shipments, damaged items, irritated customers. His thin margins evaporated in refund fees. He spent nights responding to emails and rewriting ad copy, trying to rebuild trust. In the end, he broke even, but emotionally he felt hollow. He'd invested not just time and money, but his pride. Still, Amadou refused to see these ventures as failures. Instead, he framed them as necessary steps. In his notebook, he added new entries under lessons learned. Always vet suppliers. Customer service builds reputation. Marketing words must match reality. With each bullet, he fortified his resolve. He realized that these small-scale tests were preparing him for something larger. He honed critical skills, product research, cost analysis, communication, that no classroom could match. On the day he closed his dropshipping dashboard for the final time, he didn't sigh in relief. He smiled. He recognized that success wouldn't come from avoiding failure, but from embracing it. Each misstep had sharpened his instincts, taught him to question assumptions, and reinforced his discipline. As he set aside the electronics and ad templates, Amadou felt an unexpected swell of gratitude. These ventures hadn't filled his bank account, but they had filled his toolkit with insights he would carry into his next big idea, one that would change everything. By 19, Amadou had amassed more than side gig skills. He'd gained clarity on a deeper need, born from his own struggles. Overseas students, like himself, desperately needed reliable academic support. One frost-tipped morning, he sketched a basic prototype in his notebook, a platform where vetted tutors would connect with international students, bridging language gaps and time zones. He pitched the idea to his mentor from the community center, Mr. Patel, over steaming chai and stale donuts. Mr. Patel's eyes lit up. "You've lived this pain point," he said. "Now solve it." With that encouragement, Amadou dove in. He taught himself basics of web design through online tutorials, building wireframes on a second-hand laptop. He reached out to classmates, some fluent in math, others in science, and asked if they'd volunteer as tutors in exchange for free access. To his surprise, 15 said yes. Word spread through WhatsApp groups and student unions. By the end of the first month, Amadou's platform StudyBridge had 30 users logging in for sessions. Every feedback form became a blueprint for improvement. Students complained when tutors canceled at the last minute. He introduced a backup roster. Tutors asked for clearer scheduling tools. He coded a calendar feature. In weekends that most people reserve for rest, Amadou chained himself to his computer, testing new functions and debugging errors. The hum of the laptop fan became his soundtrack. Soon, small successes snowballed. One evening, he logged in to see 100 active users, double the previous week. His chest tightened with both pride and disbelief. He'd built this from scratch, fueled by nothing but determination and a pocket full of flashcards. News of StudyBridge reached a local entrepreneurship fair against leather-jacketed startups with glossy presentations. Amadou stood with a hand-drawn poster board. When it was his turn, he spoke with quiet urgency, recounting his own challenges and how his platform solved them. Judges leaned in. Comments like scalable and high retention followed. When they called his name as grand prize winner, Amadou felt the weight of every early morning and late-night lift off his shoulders. The prize included a $5,000 seed grant and introductions to angel investors. He used that grant to register a domain, pay for basic hosting, and commission a web designer to polish the UI. The investor meetings were surreal. Suited individuals asking sharp questions about user metrics, monetization paths, and growth strategies. Amadou answered honestly, sharing his vision of affordable education access for every international student. One investor, Ms. Torres, leaned back and smiled. "You've built a platform with heart," she said. A week later, she wired $25,000 in exchange for a small equity stake. Those funds allowed him to hire 2 part-time developers and a customer support intern, transforming StudyBridge from a one-man show into a lean team. By the time he turned 20, StudyBridge housed over 10,000 registered users and 200 active tutors. The system he'd cobbled together in a basement room now ran seamlessly on cloud servers. Reviews poured in. Students praised quick responses, tutors lauded fair scheduling, and parents commended the transparent pricing. Yet for Amadou, the greatest victory remained personal. He'd taken every failure, every late shift, and every lonely meal, and woven them into a solution that eased others' burdens. He'd transformed his promise into purpose. As word spread beyond campus, articles, podcasts, even a local TV segment, Amadou knew that the hardest climb was behind him, but the real work was just beginning. His vision had grown. More subjects, more languages, and eventually mentorship programs for first-generation professionals. But on the night he closed his laptop after the investor call, he simply leaned back and whispered to himself, "We're just getting started." The invitation arrived in a crisp envelope stamped with the university seal. Amadou held it with trembling fingers, his first formal letter home. It wasn't just an invitation to an honorary doctorate ceremony. It was a summons for his family to witness the life he'd quietly built. Back in his hometown, the letter stirred excitement and disbelief. His mother read it aloud amid the clatter of pots in their kitchen. She paused at each line, voice wavering with pride. His father, usually reserved, managed a rare smile and tucked the letter into his breast pocket like a medal. His siblings crowded around, scanning the text, then erupted in joyful shouts that rattled the windows. As the days passed, preparations unfolded. His mother fussed over outfits. a simple dress for her courage, a soft scarf for long flights. His sisters sorted through old photos, selecting their best smiles. His brothers cleaned shoes until they shined. Amid the chaos, the apartment felt fuller than it ever had. Amadou, meanwhile, readied a separate kind of welcome. He booked their flights and arranged lodging near the campus. He rehearsed a greeting speech, warm but brief, enough to bridge years of absence. He mapped out the route from the airport, timing each leg so his family wouldn't feel lost. But beneath the excitement, anxiety dwelled. Would they recognize how much he'd changed? Would his mother's eyes widen at the mansion gates, or register disappointment if reality fell short of imagination? He countered each doubt with preparation. He reviewed every detail, from transportation to ceremony program. His meticulous planning was a tribute to the promise he made. No surprises, only honor. The morning of departure, the airport was a whirlwind of sound. Amadou stood in the arrivals hall, scanning faces. Jet-lagged travelers, business people, students. Then he saw them. His mother's gentle curve of her scarf, his father's straight posture, his sisters clutching matching tote bags. Their eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, time stilled. He stepped forward, arms open. His mother reached him first, wrapping him in a hug that lifted him off his feet. His father's hand rested on his shoulder, a gentle claim of pride. His siblings joked and laughed, their voices a chorus of home. They piled into a car, Amadou's black SUV with tinted windows, and started toward the campus. Each mile marked a transition, from son visiting abroad to a host welcoming home. Up ahead, the university spires glinted in the afternoon sun. As they approached the mansion-like ceremonial hall, Amadou felt a thrill. This wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was a culmination of 12 years of vows, sacrifices, and silent work. But he also knew this chapter was about more than celebration. It was about sharing victory, healing distance, and cementing legacy. He glanced in the rearview mirror at their faces, eyes bright, breaths held, and whispered, "Welcome home." The sun had barely risen when Amadou pulled the curtains open. From the suite where his family stayed, the city was quiet, just golden light spilling over the skyline, and early joggers tracing the edges of the campus quad. He turned around to find his mother sitting silently on the couch, her scarf neatly tied, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes scanned the room, not with awe, but with a quiet, searching calm. "You never told us it was like this," she whispered. "I wanted you to see it," he said gently, "not read it in a letter." Later that morning, they arrived at the university auditorium, a stately building with columns and a tall oak doorway. It looked more like a monument than a school hall. Banners fluttered overhead bearing the university seal. Students and faculty filed in, dressed in suits, gowns, and ceremony robes. Some pointed discreetly when they noticed Amadou. A few even walked up to shake his hand. His brothers lingered at the entrance, taking photos near the nameplate that bore Amadou's name as keynote speaker. His sisters touched the fabric of the honorary robe that had been pressed and laid out for him backstage. His father, silent as always, stood near the back wall and observed everything, the crowd, the cameras, the respect. As Amadou stepped onto stage, a hush rippled through the auditorium. The announcer's voice rang out. "Today, we honor a young man who crossed borders with nothing but a dream, who turned personal hardship into a public mission, who built something not just for himself, but for others." Amadou walked to the podium, heart steady, face calm. He looked down at his notes, then at the sea of faces. His voice, when it came, was steady. "I was 12 years old when I made a promise," he began, "to lift my family out of struggle, and to do it in a way that made them proud." He paused. "This isn't a speech about business or apps or success. It's about dignity, about walking to school in snow because I couldn't afford a train ticket, about saying no to easy money when saying yes would have paid my rent, about asking for help when I barely had the words to explain why I needed it." His mother wiped a tear from her cheek. His sibling sat up straighter. His father's chin lifted ever so slightly. "I built Study Bridge to solve a problem I lived. I wanted no one to feel as alone as I did those first years. I wanted a student halfway across the world to have one place where someone believed in them." There was silence in the room. not from lack of interest, but from deep listening. I didn't become rich the way people expected, but I became rich in purpose, rich in identity, rich in the people I've met and the lives I've touched. And yes, I became financially stable, but not for vanity, for freedom, for family. When he stepped down from the podium, the audience rose to their feet. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous, sustained, deeply human. Afterward, Amadou guided his family through the mansion-like building where the reception was being held. Polished floors, a garden view, catered meals, all of it. At one point, his younger brother leaned in and whispered, "They laughed when you said you'd be rich." Amadou smiled. "And now they visit my house," he replied quietly. The halls of the university echoed with laughter, praise, and gratitude. But beneath it all, Amadou's most powerful moment came not from a speech or applause, but from the way his family walked beside him now, proud, whole, and finally sharing the weight he'd carried alone for so long. Long after the ceremony ended and the campus lights dimmed, Amadou sat alone in his office, the hum of the city faint behind glass. On his desk rested a framed keynote photo, the honorary doctorate rolled in velvet ribbon, and next to it, a worn-out notebook, corners frayed, spine bent, pages heavy with years of scribbles. He opened it. There were no secrets inside, just names, lists, ideas, things learned the hard way, and one line from when he was 12. "I will become one of the richest men in America." At the time, he hadn't known what that would mean. Wealth, to his childhood self, meant money, mansions, maybe even his own driver. But the journey had redefined everything. The real riches weren't in bank statements. They were in the lives touched, the barriers broken, and the promise kept. Study Bridge had now helped more than 300,000 students. He'd expanded it into 6 countries. Newer programs had launched. Career mentoring, scholarships for low-income immigrant youth, and mental health access for international students struggling in silence. He gave quietly, without press. That was his way. But Amadou never drifted far from the life he came from. Once a month, he sat with a group of teenage boys in underserved neighborhoods, first-generation kids trying to survive a system they didn't build. He never gave them speeches. He told them stories. And he listened. One of them once asked, "Why do you still come here when you don't have to?" He answered simply, "Because someone needs to remind you that where you start doesn't decide where you finish." He didn't need recognition, but he had earned something rarer, respect, from those who knew his story, from those who shared his struggle, from those who remembered the quiet boy who cleaned floors, not the man invited to global tech summits. His family had returned home after the ceremony, but everything had changed. His father, who once said little, now told neighbors, "My son built something in silence." His mother planted a tree in front of their apartment and told people it grew from a promise. In Amadou's mansion, modern, minimal, sunlit by choice, there were no gold-plated doors or marble statues, just a wall of photos, his siblings' graduations, the first tutor he ever hired, the letter that invited him to speak, and at the center, an empty frame. It was for the next dream, the one not yet fulfilled. Because Amadou knew the truth of legacy. It isn't the wealth you accumulate. It's what you pass on. Not cash. Character. Not applause. Opportunity. He had become what he'd once declared out loud at 12. Not just rich in America, but rich for America. Not for attention. For a purpose. And now, as night stretched across the city, he closed the notebook one final time, exhaled, and whispered the 3 words that had carried him through it all. We keep building.